Hello everyone! Today we have a special guest named Erika LaCasse, and she's going to tell us about her story, how she graduated from Cornell and then eventually started CassCaps with her father. And in addition to that, she's also going to be a consultant at McKinsey. So it's a really interesting story to see how everything worked out, especially because she started with her father during the COVID-19 pandemic. Like, what kind of story is this? Like, who started a business during the pandemic? She did.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me, Christine. I'm really happy to be here.
Can you give us a short intro about yourself, either about your background or your career or your professional or personal background?
Just to give a really short intro, my name is Erika, and I actually was born in Brazil and grew up in Latin America, both Brazil and Mexico. And then I just recently graduated from Cornell in December 2019, studying applied economics and management. While I was at Cornell, I was heavily involved on campus. I was a Division I varsity diver. I was also the VP of Phi Chi Theta, which is actually how I met Christine, and was also in Cornell Finance Club. Professional-wise, I actually had a very interesting, zigzagging professional experience throughout college. I started off as a biological sciences major my freshman year, and then pivoted towards the business school my sophomore year. And that's kind of where I had, three main internship experiences. The first was at a talent development consulting firm in Spain. The second was at JP Morgan in wealth management. And the third was at McKinsey and Company in New York City. I'm actually going to be returning full-time to McKinsey in a couple of weeks, so very excited. But in the meantime, between graduating in December 2019 and now, I actually launched a company with my dad called CassCaps. And we just launched it over the summer. So it's been a very exciting year.
I guess I'm going to ask you the icebreaker that I have been asking to every guest that I had on these interviews. And that is, if you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing?
I would try to learn every language. I know that sounds a little bit nerdy and cheesy, but I think languages are very beautiful. I actually speak 3 languages myself and have always been trying to learn more languages. My mom speaks 7, my dad speaks 5, my sister speaks 4, and I guess I'm the straggler at 3. But my sister and I, since we were very young, we always joked around how we wanted to, beat my mom and learn more languages than her. So we're halfway there. We're getting in there.
Okay, so we're gonna go right into some more personal questions. What do you wish you did more of or less of? And I think because of the COVID-19 quarantine, this is probably something that we're thinking even more so because we're just trying to either wind down or even do more of something because it's almost like New Year's resolutions on steroids.
I agree. I guess one of the things that I did more of is unplug from the world. I think, we live in a society where we're all very dependent on, social media, on our laptops, on our phones, and we're always glued to them. And I kind of wish I wasn't so obsessed with checking my email or, being next to my phone. And if I could just leave it on the table and go out for a nature walk, that's what I wish I did more of. Less of, I guess, stressing out about things that don't really matter. I pay attention to the smallest of details of every little thing that I do. And, it's a blessing and a curse because that drives me crazy sometimes. And sometimes it's for nothing because I stress out about things that don't really matter. So I really wish I maybe focused less on that.
And during the quarantine, has that helped you a little bit more to do some of this or do more of something like that?
I actually feel like it's been harder to unplug during the quarantine just because people haven't been going out as much. You don't do a lot of the things that you used to. Like, I don't go on brunch, go out for brunch or for dinner with all of my friends as I used to. I'm not hanging out with a lot of people as I used to. So I feel like we're actually trapped indoors watching more Netflix, watching more TV. So in a sense, I actually feel like it has worsened my connection to technology, but yeah.
Okay, so what is something that most people don't know about you?
I'm a pretty open book, but I guess if you don't know me, you might not know that I'm really accident prone for some reason. I've broken around 16 bones throughout my life.
Oh my God.
Yeah. There's a story behind each one of them, but I've broken a lot of bones. we already talked about languages, so I guess that's not really anything new. But I really love chocolate too. So if you want to weigh into my heart, it's through chocolate.
What's your favorite type of chocolate?
Literally any type of chocolate. I have hot chocolate every night. I eat bars of chocolate all the time.
Wow.
Chocolate cookies, chocolate everything.
Okay, so now we're going to go right into the career section of this interview. It's not going to be just on your career, it's also going to be on your involvement with CassCaps. So just kind of basically anything work related, but who knows, maybe CassCaps is not even work related, it's just a passion project for you too. So the first thing is, why did you get into consulting field and why McKinsey?
Good question. This is a long one. This is a big one. I really took my time in college to explore different potential career paths, and I think that's the beauty of college, is that you get to adventure off into exploring what would be a good fit for you. As I briefly mentioned earlier, I actually started off in biology, and then I pivoted to HR, and then to finance and consulting and entrepreneurship. So I've dabbled in a lot of different areas, but I ultimately landed in this path to consulting through mostly trial and error. As I was saying, the beauty of college and internship is that you get to explore and find your passion and path before you have to fully commit to it. So I remember actually I guess it was my sophomore year, when I received the call that I received an internship for JP Morgan in wealth management. And I was ecstatic. I was like, I never have to recruit again. I never have to, apply to any job. I'm just going to do great in this internship, come back my junior year, go back full time, and I'm all set for life. And, that would have been a great story, but I ended up not liking the job. It's nothing against JP Morgan. It's nothing against wealth management or finance. It's, quite the opposite. I had a fantastic experience. The firm was wonderful. I learned so much about wealth management, about finance, about the markets, and I'm incredibly grateful for that experience. But it just wasn't the right fit for me. It's the right fit for a lot of people, but it wasn't for me. So I basically took the aspects that I liked about my internship, the client focus, the thorough analysis, the thinking outside the box, and then I pivoted towards finding something that fit the things that I really liked and that kind of took away from the aspects that I did not like. And some of those aspects that I didn't like was, falling into the same routine. So I kind of felt like what I was doing was the same every day, or I felt like I wasn't being challenged at times. And I wanted to be in a job where I was working in a dynamic environment where, after 2 months of working on the job, you still didn't really know how to do it that well because you were still learning. And that's where I want to be. So it was actually my boyfriend, who at the time was working at EY as a consultant, who initially planted that consulting seed into my head. He literally watched me grow over the summer, and I guess throughout college too. And after my reflection and realizations for my internship, and him watching me through that development process, he's the one who approached me with this unique perspective and said, consulting might be a good fit for you. And sometimes it's the people that know you the best that can actually give you a nudge when you feel stuck, because they have a very unbiased perspective. They have an unbiased view of your skills and of, your personality, your ambition, and what you might be good at, and they can have an objective take. So when my boyfriend, pushed me towards, planted that seed in consulting, I explored it more, and I ended up, applying to consulting, ended up working at McKinsey, and I absolutely loved my internship there. But I think what's most important for when you're navigating and exploring different career paths is to understand that you'll never love it 100% of the time. You're not going to love 100% of your job 100% of your time. But what my dad has always told me is that if you love your 80% of your job 80% of the time, then you're in a really good spot. And that was me for consulting. There are definitely aspects of consulting that I don't like, but I loved 80% of it 80% of the time. So that's how, I think that this is the good path for me.
That's an amazing quote, honestly. I didn't think about that. I just thought you have to love your job or you have to hate your job, nothing really in between. But I'm actually pretty curious now, what was that 20% that you didn't like?
Yeah, so the biggest one was waking up super early to catch a flight. I know that might sound very superficial, but I love sleep. Love sleep. I'm a true believer in 8 hours of sleep. And it was very hard for me to wake up at 4 a.m. on Mondays to go to the airport and catch a 6 a.m. flight for 3 hours in an uncomfortable seat. The other thing that I don't like about it is that sometimes it's also very unpredictable. So you're very dependent on what, the client needs and when, and sometimes things arise out of the blue and you just have to deal with it. And I guess that's with life, it's not always predictable and you're going to have to handle things as they come. But my boyfriend's also a consultant. So it was just interesting because during my summer internship experience, we were both traveling during the week, and it was like the weekend was our time to be together. And then, sometimes things would pop up either on his end or my end. And then that would kind of have a dent on our weekend. But, the negative aspects of it are definitely small. There's a lot more benefits that were great.
All right. So what is some advice for someone interested in consulting or McKinsey?
Ooh, good one. I think that there's two ways of knowing whether or not consulting would be a good fit for you. The first is doing it, obviously. And the second one is talking to as many people as possible who have done it. So if you think that you're interested in consulting, I can't stress enough how important it is to reach out to as many people as possible, alumni, peers, anyone that you know that is in consulting, to learn about their experiences. Because as you learn about their experiences and their day-to-day, and you have those different perspectives from different people, that's when you can kind of get put the puzzle pieces together and see if that would be a good fit for you or not. And then if you think that consulting would be a good fit for you, and you can work in ambiguity, you can work with waking up at 4 a.m. to catch those flights, and work with the fact that every couple of months or so you're going to have to switch your projects and learn about a new industry and learn about a new function and be able to do that pivot every time. So if you think that those things sound like something that you'd be up for, then I would recommend exploring some consulting resources and starting the prep work for it. Because I'm not going to lie, consulting prep is pretty intense. If you've been through it, I know Christine, you can probably attest to this too. It's tough, but with the right motivation and preparation, you can definitely walk into an interview very confident. So I would recommend checking out. There's one resource I really like. It's Victor Chang's book called Case Interview Secrets. Victor Chang was actually an ex-McKinsey guy who now writes blogs and helps out students looking into going into the consulting world. And I love this book. I should honestly get a royalty for the amount of times that I've recommended this book, because I literally recommend this to everyone who tells me that they think they're interested in consulting. So Victor Chang, if you're listening to this, but it's a really good book. It teaches you, kind of the basics of consulting. It teaches you the basics of how to approach a case study. So I think it's a really great way to dip your toes. And if you enjoy the process of going through these case prep, case studies and practicing, and you enjoy that process, then that's actually a really good indication that you're probably going to enjoy the job. Because that's essentially what the job is. Case studies are like mini engagements that are hyper-focused for just your 1 hour interview, but that's literally what the job entails. So if you like that process, it's a good indication. And, on the other end, if you hate case prepping and you hate doing, case studies, then that's also probably an indication that you might not actually like the job. So
I personally have not actually heard of someone say, try the cases first, try case prepping, and then see if that's something that you like. I've always just heard, do your networking, have an internship, but something as concrete as actually doing a case, which, I mean, in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense because each client, each project is essentially a case that you're trying to crack a problem and try to solve it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I still think it's important to network and to talk to people. Again, talking to as many people as possible in the field that you're interested in is a good way to learn about what the job really entails. But doing case prepping is also a good way to kind of see, what it would be like.
Yeah, something I've actually also been recommending to people is that Victor Chang also has a YouTube channel. That's actually how I did a lot of case prep too, is that he did basically recorded all his lectures talking about how to do your case interviews and how to prep and everything like that. That's mostly was my resource when I did it. I didn't even know about the book at the time, but I mean, his YouTube channel was completely free. So if you don't want to pay money and you should still buy the book though. But if you don't want to pay the money and you want to find free resources, the YouTube channel is also good too.
I actually didn't even know about the YouTube channel, so this thing is everywhere, I guess. I know that he does have a website too, and his website was also very helpful. He has some math drills in there. He has some, I think you can also purchase the look over my shoulder cases where he basically records him giving case studies to different students. and he has like
Wow.
what a case study should be like, and then what a case study should not be like, so that you can kind of see both sides of the spectrum. So he definitely has a lot of resources out there. Didn't tap into all of them, obviously, because I didn't even know about the YouTube channel, but seems like you agree with me then that he would be a really great person to start with.
Definitely. And so just like moving over into CassCaps, you also made a Kickstarter campaign for your startup and product CassCaps. Can you tell us about how that came to be and how it even like unraveled? That's like that's like during the summer, which is, I don't know, very small, but ended up becoming really big.
Yeah, so there's a lot that I can say about CassCaps. It's been an incredible journey, but I guess just to start with what CassCaps even is. It's a patented cap that goes on spice jars, and it eliminates the need for measuring spoons by measuring straight out of the bottle. So the cap allows you to select, between a quarter and half a teaspoon, and then you just flip the bottle with the spices in the cap, and you twist it, and then depending on what you selected, that amount is what's dispensed out of it. So it's basically a way to eliminate measuring spoons. And the story behind it is actually kind of bizarre, but my dad came up with this idea about 25 years ago when he was working in the food industry. He was working for Chiquita Banana, and he was always interested in like kitchen gadgets for some reason. And he was baking bread with my mom, and he got very frustrated with like measuring out the dill and the rosemary and like all of the little spices that went into the bread. So he literally was like, I wish you could just measure straight from the bottle. But he was young, he didn't have money, he was, working full time, so it wasn't something that he could really explore. And it wasn't until, about 5 years ago when he retired from the corporate world that he decided to give, what's now CassCaps another shot. So he hired a contract engineer, he filed a patent, and he was granted a patent. He, developed some of the preliminary designs. He 3D printed some prototypes, but at that point he had invested a lot of, time and energy and money to it. And he kind of wanted to just retire. So he left it there. And then me, energetic Erika, about to graduate from college about a year ago, knowing that I already had a job secured with McKinsey in fall 2020, and knowing that I was pretty far ahead in my coursework where I would be able to graduate early, I thought, why not graduate early and try to do something entrepreneurial? I've always been like my dad, pretty, innovative, always thinking about new ideas, and I really wanted to start something. And my dad convinced me that there was no way that I would be able to bring, a concept that I had in my head all the way to market in just 8 months, which is like what I had at that time, right? So he told me, that takes a lot of time, but why don't you just take over my half-baked CassCaps idea? It wasn't called CassCaps then, but why don't you just take over my spice measuring cap idea? And that's kind of when my dad and I decided to partner together, and we started CassCaps together. So we picked up where he left off with the 3D printed prototypes. We continued with all of the design, the final works, adding new features, taking out some features, improving the design until we finally finalized it. And then we, talked to different manufacturers, and we lined up our injection molding facility, our manufacturer, and kind of got everything together. And then we just recently launched our Kickstarter campaign in August, so this summer. And it was incredibly successful. It was more successful than we could have anticipated. We're extremely happy with the results. And it's just been an incredible experience to, just a year ago from today, be thinking about doing this. And then now having actually, launched it, we're in the middle of manufacturing. We're very excited to fulfill our orders from Kickstarter and see where it takes us. So
How is life working with family? What do you guys do when there are disagreements, especially if you are mixing in family with business? It's just like very, I don't know, it's a very blurry line there in terms of like, I'm just imagining people screaming at Thanksgiving about like, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. So I'm just curious, like, how did you guys go around this?
this is a very tricky question, and it's inevitable. Working with family is bound to bring up some disagreements. I'm very, very close with my dad. Throughout college, I would literally call him every single night, and I'd call my parents every single night and talk to them. So I've always been very close to my dad. And the one thing that we agreed with, starting business together on CassCaps, is that we did not want to jeopardize our relationship regardless of how the business went. So it might sound kind of, tough, but we actually created an internal contract where we literally physically signed a contract devising, what our roles were and what was expected out of each other, and how much finance was him contributing, me contributing. Like, we literally were very upfront about what our expectations were from each other, to make sure that if things got heated at any moment, we could always go back to it and remember, that our relationship as father and daughter comes first. Between, that, like, family comes first, then our business. And we wanted to make sure that nothing would cause a fallout in the future. So that was something that we were very diligent with doing from the beginning. Now, of course, we still have a lot of arguments, and I'm very similar to my dad, which is great and which is also terrible, because we both have very strong opinions, and we're very, we have very strong opinions. So we clash sometimes. I feel very strongly about doing it this way, and he feels very strongly about doing it that way. But this is where we kind of, if things get too heated, we just take a step back, and we try to separate the emotion and the family side out of it, and just concentrate on, the business side of it, like what makes sense for the business and for the future and for this and for that. So it is hard sometimes to split the two, but I think that being upfront from the beginning on what the expectations are, and making sure to pause and take a step back if things do get heated, is the most important aspect of working with family.
And also, is there a misconception people usually have of the entrepreneurship process?
I'll admit this too. When I wanted to start my company last year, I was just like, oh, this will be great. I have 8 months. 8 months is so much time. Like, in 1 month, we'll finalize the design, and then we're going to manufacture it for 2 more months, and then we're going to sell it, and then we're going to be done. And like, in 5 months, this is going to be done. That's not how it works at all. There's so many different curveballs. There's so many different things that you have to think about. And I think a lot of people might not realize that in the beginning. And it's something that you kind of get introduced to pretty early on into the process, as you're starting your own company. But the amount of work that actually goes into it is pretty overwhelming at times. And it's not always a straightforward path. As an entrepreneur, you really do wear like 50,000 hats at the same time, because especially our team is predominantly just my dad and I. So we're literally in charge of everything. And that can be overwhelming if you don't plan it right. So I think sometimes people forget that, there's a lot of moving parts. There's legal, there's manufacturing, there's marketing, there's customer service, there's sales, there's, you are all of it. But then the other thing too that I think that there's a misconception is that it's always going to be, breezy, and you're going to get a lot of support along the way. Yes, you will get a lot of support from friends and family, and yes, you'll get, a lot of support for being like a small business and a startup, and there's a lot of people who want to see you succeed. But there's also a lot of mean people out there, and I will say that you kind of do have to have tough skin, and that's one realization that has really hit me hard over this past year. It's that for any entrepreneur or anyone starting a business, or even you with this YouTube channel and starting something new, most people, I mean, not all, but most people have really good intentions, and they want to share with the world something that they find very valuable. Whether it be me with CassCaps or you with your podcast, like, we want to share new things with the world.
Right.
But it doesn't fit everyone's needs. And, that's why there's markets, because, the market for, XYZ product is different than the market for that product, because some people will be attracted to some things and some people will be attracted to others. But there's a lot of hate in the world. And I think that that's one thing that, it was a big wake up call, I guess, over the past year, was that especially with the anonymity of like online commenting and advertising and stuff, that it's a very powerful tool for people to do a lot of damage to you personally, and they might not even realize it. So to anyone who's watching this, even if you don't agree with a new product that's coming out in the market, you might not be the target, but that doesn't mean that you should be putting that person down or that company down. You might think that it's a big corporation, but like CassCaps, for example, it's just 2 people on the other end. And when people are very mean and criticizing a video that I spent, hours in my basement filming and perfecting and editing and doing all sorts of things, and then when people bring it down, it brings me down personally. So I think that the other misconception with just startups is that it's all going to be, a lot of support and all like rainbows and roses. It can get tough, especially when people try to bring you down. But the important thing to remember is that, you can't look at those negative comments as your driver. You should just really look at your supporters and your believers for that motivation, and let them fuel your drive, not the haters, to cut it short.
That's a great point. And speaking of hardships, I'm actually pretty curious because you kept on talking about manufacturers and also like especially a tight timeline that you have. How did you guys manage through this COVID-19 pandemic, especially starting during the pandemic, not even just like trying to stay functioning?
Yeah, so everything for our company started to really pick up around, February, March, which is also when the pandemic also kind of, hit the strongest or started to really, ramp up. And there was a point where we were debating whether or not it made sense for us to start a company right now. We're like, there's so much uncertainty in the world. We don't even know what's going to happen, a week from now. Like, is this really the right time to be starting something? But the pandemic, my parents were building a house and the pandemic brought my entire family back under one roof. As we kind of did more of that, soft stuff that wasn't fully committing to it, we realized we were getting a lot of support from it. And we decided that it did make sense for us to move forward, especially since we were all there to collaboratively work together under the same roof. And some of the hardships that we faced, we faced a lot of them. There were a lot of supply shortages in areas that you wouldn't expect. There was a point where we were bottles, for example, like spice bottles. You would think that, those would be readily available, but literally all suppliers were sold out of spice bottles.
Wow.
And that's literally a integral part of our product. And it was just like doing a lot of research to make sure that we had all of our ducks lined up because there was a lot of supply shortages in different areas. Manufacturing facilities, for example, were also shut down because manufacturing was supposed to be for only essential items. So obviously CassCaps is not essential, which completely understandable, but that also put a damper on, our manufacturing capabilities and on our timeline because we weren't able to manufacture when we were actually ready. And then, of course, you have the fear of the unknown and debating or not, whether or not this was still a good time to do it. So there was definitely a lot of hardships, but it's just taking one thing at a time. And if a problem comes up, you try to problem solve, try to see what are the potential alternative solutions, and kind of just take it day by day, problem by problem.
So something that's important when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic is that you're just basically going to go stay at home. You're all stir crazy. So what were some things that you guys did to at least stay sane or help with your mental and emotional health?
I think it was just always having a plan. So I think part of what drives you crazy too is if you don't really know, like being anxious about not knowing what's next, I think is what really drives people crazy.
Yeah.
So if you have some sort of a plan, then you have goals to work towards, and that kind of makes that time not feel like you're wasting it or not feel like you're not doing something useful for it because you're working towards a goal and you have a plan set out to reach that goal. So like I said in the beginning, when everything was truly locked down, like no one was walking out, we turned our kitchen into literally a videography studio where we were doing our cooking vlogs. So if you look at CassCaps Instagram, I made a lot of cooking videos showing how to use our product and stuff to try to create a community of food lovers. So we would literally, we would only go grocery shopping, but we'd buy a ton of groceries. And then every single day, like my mom, my sister, and I would make these cooking videos. And there was a purpose behind them. It was to build out our social media platform, and it was engaging. And, we ate a lot of really good food that month, different recipe every night. But we always had a goal to work towards. So then, it also came to the part of like, okay, now we have to start the Kickstarter video. So it was like, let's dedicate this day to doing all the script writing and shooting the video and editing it. And then we also have to figure out our packaging. So let's dedicate this day to like designing our packaging and ordering it and figuring out what company we want to partner with. And we just had a plan in place. And I think that is what kept us sane is, again, having the plan and working towards a common goal.
Mm-hmm. So it's essentially like order within chaos, or try to put order to chaos. On the same lines, what were the important lessons that you learned along the way?
I've made so many mistakes, and I think that's literally lesson number one is that you are going to make mistakes along the way. There's no avoiding it. You can be the most cautious person who does all of the research in the world, and you're still going to make mistakes. So I think a really big lesson there is to accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes, and when the mistakes come along, don't try to beat yourself up for it, but rather learn from that mistake and then try to mitigate the impact of that mistake. But just accept that it's there because it's going to happen. And then another thing that I really learned from this process was that whenever you plan something, whether it be a timeline or whether it be some sort of budget or model, you always have to give yourself some breathing room. If you think that it's going to take you 3 months to do something, budget 4. If you think that it's going to take you X amount of dollars to do this, budget 2X. Because one thing that I've learned for sure from this whole process is having some working room from the beginning when you're budgeting and when you're making your timeline and when you're making your financial budgets, it's really important so that you can have a more realistic, holistic picture. There's going to be a lot of hidden costs. There's going to be a lot of, hidden rocks on the road. And if you give yourself breathing room from the beginning, you'll be able to kind of, anticipate those.
So I'm curious, what were some of the mistakes that you guys made, or you specifically, if anything?
So many. I think one of them was probably shipping was one of the mistakes that we made, and I'll openly talk about this. Shipping is really expensive, and I think that the Amazons of the world who are offering 2-day free shipping have also kind of ruined the perception, but from the customer's expectations of shipping are very different. Because I admit, I even expect shipping to be free for all sorts of things, right? Because Amazon has ruined me forever. But the truth is that shipping is not free, and shipping is actually very expensive. And when we realized how expensive it would be to ship our bottles and caps because of the weight and the dimensions, we wanted to subsidize a lot of it because we didn't want our customers to have to, have all of those, have the burden of all of those costs. So we did subsidize a lot of it. But we also didn't take into account, the handling fees, which is actually something that adds a pretty significant amount to those shipping costs. And international shipping, for example, we also didn't realize that there's, you can deliver duties paid or deliver duties unpaid, which means your international person in the UK will either receive their package right in their first step and all of the duties will be paid, or it's going to arrive at a customs facility and then they're going to have to go there, they're going to have to pick it up, they're going to have to pay VAT, and that's a negative experience for them.
Right.
So there's just a lot of little implications of shipping that we didn't realize, and we ended up eating, a lot of money because we don't want to upset our customers. So we assumed, we understand that we recognize the mistake, and we are not going to relay any financial, additional financial burden to our customers. We're going to eat it, but it was a pretty heavy, mistake. Or just something as simple as shipping that you might not think too much about. But it's things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you mentioned customers, did you have customers separate from Kickstarter, or were they solely Kickstarter customers?
Yeah. So right now our goal is on fulfilling Kickstarter orders because they were our initial supporters. Our Kickstarter campaign was our first launch. So the 1,200-ish people that supported us on Kickstarter, those are our true first supporters that we're going to, they're our priority. However, we're also looking into starting a pre-order store where people who missed out on the Kickstarter campaign but would still like to support the company and purchase CassCaps will still have the opportunity to do so. So we will open the doors for new customers, so to say.
Okay, sounds good. And those links will be down in the description down below. So if you want to have some CassCaps, you have the opportunity. So this is just going to be mostly on a general question on, you seem to come from a background of innovation and problem solving, for FICA data to consulting to CassCaps. Have you always been like that? What's your story behind that?
I think I have always been very intellectually curious. And again, earlier when we talked about, what motivates me and what drives me, and I always said it's learning and it's growing and it's developing and it's just, that sense of accomplishment at the end of beating a challenge. And I really do think that I've always been intellectually curious. And when I was thinking back on this, when I was little and I was living in Mexico, I was probably 7 years old, maybe 7 years old probably. I started a company with my sister, her name is Tammy, and we called it T&E Company. My sister and I, we had 2 customers, my mom and my dad. Now you're like, what the heck is this company? Well, my sister and I hated doing chores. And we were trying to find a creative way to get out of doing chores. So we decided to build T&E Company to basically charge our parents for us to do the chores that we were supposed to do anyway. And my dad, being the businessman and the entrepreneur himself, he actually played along with it. And he's the one who taught me how to use Excel. So he literally gave me like this really old laptop. He opened up Excel and he showed me, how to do a sum formula and just how to like literally set up Excel. We literally created all these light items of chores that we were supposed to do anyway. And I put dollar amounts to them. It was also ridiculous. I charged my parents like $300 to feed the dog. 7-year-old Erika didn't know what the value of money was. But the point was that we literally created a business to charge my parents to do our chores. And my sister and I thought that we were so clever. But my dad was actually the real clever one, because every time we would do our chores, my dad, who showed me how to do the spreadsheet, he would always be like, oh, just add it to our tab, like just add it to our tab, as in like the spreadsheet. And he's like, we'll pay you in check like at the end of the year, which he never did. So basically, T&E Company has about $1 million worth of debt to be collected from my parents. But that silly example just literally goes to show that even when I was very little, I was always thinking of innovative ways to do something, to start something. And T&E Company was my first real company.
That is so cool. I like, honestly, your dad seems to be so amazing. He seemed to be like not only just a good businessman, but also a good father. I mean, I guess in a way that they're teaching you lessons, but you're supposed to be owed $1 million. I guess that's, I don't know. He's in debt now, but I guess you paid your debt by your involvement in CassCaps. But wow, that's definitely like a fun story to tell. Honestly, I wish I had something like that. I didn't even get quarters for washing the dishes.
Yeah, my dad has been a really great role model to me my entire life. I've really looked over to him, and I mean, I guess it kind of shows through this interview too, just how close my dad and I have always been. Which is why I said again how it's important to separate your family relationship from your business relationship if you do go into business with your family. But yeah, they, both my parents and my sister, we've always been close, and they've all been really great role models to me. So.
Okay, so if you had one piece of advice for someone that wants to start their own startup, what would it be?
Love it. Well, the key to start a startup is to start. I know that it sounds kind of daunting, but if you have great ideas in your head, you should start acting on them to make it into a reality, or else they're just going to be that ideas in your head that never, have anything happen to them. And it can be like my dad, who had this idea 25 years ago and it doesn't come into fruition until, 25 years later. But if you have an idea that you think is worth pursuing, start acting on it as soon as possible. If you're a student, you should definitely leverage all of your university resources. I dipped my toes into entrepreneurship my last year at Cornell, and I was just amazed by the amount of resources that they had dedicated to entrepreneurs and student entrepreneurs. There's so many opportunities out there for funding, for mentorship, for advice, for all sorts of things. So definitely try to leverage all of those resources if you can. If you're not a student, you can still leverage, the internet. You can still leverage books. You can still leverage podcasts. You can still leverage networks. So reach out to alumni, peers, and people who have started companies. And again, hear about their stories and see about how they did this and how they did that. So before my Kickstarter, for example, I reached out to some other successful Kickstarter campaigns. I reached out to maybe like 100 of them on LinkedIn, and one responded. But that one person was all that I needed. Matt from Tidyboard, he was a great mentor to me. He literally sat down with me for like an hour and just told me all sorts of things that were really helpful before I launched my Kickstarter. So there's definitely a lot of things that you can be doing to kind of learn whether or not you have a valuable idea, like a good idea that is worth pursuing. So apart from doing all of that research and leveraging all the resources out there, I would also, if it's just you, I would try to find a potential co-founder that has complementary skills. So if you're a business person and you have like a specific product, then maybe hire an engineer to be your co-founder. Because if you guys are co-founders and partners, you'll be, more incentivized to work together, and you'll be motivated and inspired to work together. So create a plan, find a partner, try to create a prototype if it's, a physical product, or even if it's an app, create a prototype, even if it's very crude, just to kind of see, if it works or if there's viability to it. And interview potential customers, and see if you're really fitting, a problem that's out there. But again, everything's an idea up until you start acting on it. So
This is the last question I have on this section. And with all of this, what are your tips for time management and work-life balance? And I think we've kind of briefly touched this a little bit more about like your mental and emotional health, but on the outside of your career, outside of CassCaps, like what would you be doing to kind of mitigate time management and work-life balance issues?
So, another great quote from the wise man, my dad. He always tells me, don't forget to smell the roses. I'm pretty sure he didn't make up that quote. He got it from somewhere, but he always tells me, don't forget to smell the roses. And I think that that's, really important because sometimes we are, we're so motivated to work and we work really hard, but it's important to take a step back and enjoy the simple pleasures of life because or else, what are you working so hard for if you're not going to take the time to actually
Right.
enjoy life? So whether that means taking a 15-minute walk around the block to just ease your mind, or whether that means, sitting down for dinner with your boyfriend or your loved ones, or just talking on the phone with your parents, find time for the things that are really important. And, because that's the only way to live, in my opinion. I don't think you should
Right.
be so focused on working that you neglect all of the other things that are important in life.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the other big points of advice, I don't know if it's come through yet through this interview, but I'm a really big planner. I like having things planned out, even though I know that, most of the times it's not going to go exactly as planned, but I like having a rough idea, a rough trajectory of where I'm headed and what's going on. So one of my biggest advice is to plan. If you can anticipate when you're going to be really busy or when you're going to have a heavier workload or when you're going to have a lighter workload, then you can better balance out your time so that you can have a more balanced life. So planning is important. Another point of advice is to make a habit of engaging on a healthy hobby so that you have a go-to strategy to deal with your stress. So for me, I kind of mentioned this earlier, it's drawing. It's pencil drawing with a Warwick candle, and just letting my mind go, be creative for the night. So I think having hobbies is also important, and a good way to, balance out the stress in your life.
Mm-hmm. And I know this is like a little probably not going to be possible, but did you start any quarantine hobbies? I know like probably any of your free time was probably used on CassCaps or on drawing with your Warwick candle, but did you have any like quarantine hobbies that everyone's talking about, like baking something or going on new walks or even, I don't know, starting new workouts?
So I think cooking, it's kind of like an obvious one because like CassCap is all about cooking and I had to literally start a cooking video. So I became a lot more in tune with cooking and with baking and using spices, which, it's kind of funny because before I used to never really cook with a lot of spices. But as I've grown CassCaps and created these recipes with lots of spices, it's so amazing what they can do. So definitely something that I've done a lot more during quarantine is cooking and exploring in the kitchen. I really like baking. Actually, not really baking. I really like decorating. So like pencil drawing. I've always been creative with, like the details on the outside, but so I don't love baking, but I love decorating cakes that I bake. And that's actually always been a hobby of mine. You can ask all my friends. I'm always happy to find an excuse to bake someone a cake just so that I can decorate it like very intricately.
So that is the end of our career segment, and then we're going to move into more about the women's segment. So, what are some challenges that you have faced as a woman? So, anything that could be career related or personal related or anything like that, and how did you overcome that?
This is a really interesting question because, to be completely honest, whether I was interning in finance or consulting or whether I was talking to contractors with CassCaps related things, I never saw myself as female versus male or like young versus old. I kind of just saw myself as, maybe it was just me being naive, but I never really, compared myself to anyone else. I just kind of went in as me. And I've actually experienced something pretty interesting with CassCaps in the sense that my dad is my partner and he's a lot older and I'm young, and he's male and I'm female. And we actually had this experience with one specific contractor that I'm the person who reached out to them. I was the point of contact. I built the relationship. I started everything. Like, I was literally the lead on this one specific, work stream, I guess you're gonna say, like workflow. And every time we had like a phone conference, I was always disregarded. I'm literally the one who built that relationship and did everything for it. And yet every time I would say something, the other person would just be like, and Mark, like, what are your thoughts? And then my dad would say exactly the same as me. And they're like, okay,
Wow.
what's the point? And I'm like, I just said that. Like, but I think that, I don't really know whether that was an age thing or a, female versus male thing. But a realization that I guess I've had is that regardless of whether it's through CassCaps or if it's me through consulting or being in finance, which have been predominantly male dominated for so many years, you're gonna experience some of this, and I've just come to accept it, that there's gonna be times where perhaps I won't be taken as seriously or that I will be disregarded, but I never really go in with the mindset of that. I always go in with the mindset
Right.
that I am equal to everyone around me. And I think sometimes that naiveness, in a sense, is kind of a blessing, because I don't see it that way.
Definitely, like now that I'm actually in the workplace, especially with consulting, I've actually definitely seen not necessarily male versus female, but the age thing, because especially a lot of our clients are going to be like, you just graduated from college. Like, why do we need to listen to you? Like, what experience do you have? And then they always look at the managing director or the managers, but then they kind of like overlook all of the analysts and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, it's really just building a rapport and then actually trying to show people that like I actually know my stuff. And at the end of the day, they start to put us on equal standing.
Yeah. And kind of what you just said, it's exactly that with consulting, because I mean, I get it, in the
Yeah.
perspective of like someone who just hired a consultant to have, a 22-year-old fresh out of college to be telling you how to run the business that you've been running for 20 years. Like, I can see their point of view. But, it's just, like you said, you just have to build your credibility, just do your work to the best of your ability and to present it. And then hopefully, that kind of perception will dismantle and your true worth will shine through.
Definitely. And what are some pitfalls you notice women do, and what have you done to get out of it?
I think some of the pitfalls that women fall under is making themselves small. They kind of allow themselves to cave in and they lose confidence when they really need it the most, especially if they're surrounded by people who they're intimidated by. Whether that be older people, more senior people, or males, or whoever it is. I think women tend to cave in and kind of lose their confidence quickly. So what I kind of do to mitigate this is surround myself with very empowering women, especially entrepreneurial women, who can kind of rub off on me that great, confident, powerful leader spirit. While I was at Cornell, I was a part of the We Cornell program, which is actually called the Women Entrepreneurs, Cornell program. And I was very lucky to have an amazing female mentor who was an incredible angel throughout my whole entrepreneurial journey thus far. And I truly believe that when you surround yourself with people that you admire, with people that, inspire you and motivate you, they rub off on you and you become like them. So I recommend, surrounding yourself as much as possible with these types of people, with who you want to be, because that's, they're going to rub off on you, and that's what you'll ultimately get to.
Yeah, I'm actually a very strong believer of like you are the people that are like the 5 closest people around you. That's like something that I like to surround myself by strong, independent, and ambitious women too, because that's actually something that I completely believe in. If I have one person that's maybe a weak link that is negative, I just cut them out. You're not needed here. You're just going to tell me things that I'm going to start to doubt myself. And it's a lot of like human nature here where whoever is around you, you're going to start to believe that's what you are, that's what you are meant to do. But if you surround yourself with very strong people that know that there's better to life than just these small little hardships, but to keep going forward, that's exactly what we need to be doing. And I'm really happy that also worked out for you too.
Yeah, I think it's actually like a proven theory. Maybe not proven, but I've definitely heard of it, that it's like you're the average of the 5 or 7, something like that, people closest to you. So surround yourself by inspiring and motivated and amazing people, and that's what I hope to be the average of.
Okay, and that is actually going to be the conclusion of our interview. We're going to go a little bit more into an outro. So what have you been up to lately? I'm hearing a lot of sirens. I think you just moved into New York City, so I'm curious about how that experience was, especially during the pandemic too. So I'm just curious about what have you been up to, and how can we find you on social media?
Yeah, so spot on. I did just move to New York City. I actually just moved to Brooklyn. So still, getting everything sorted out here, but this is my little room. But it's been very cozy moving into New York City. I've been working a lot on CassCaps, obviously. Been writing personal thank you letters, thank you cards to each person that backed our Kickstarter campaign because I want to show my appreciation. I'm also doing some more videos right now for our Instagram content and our blog and all of that. And honestly, just trying to enjoy the last 2 weeks of freedom before I'm out in the corporate world, starting off my corporate career. So, yeah. Oh, and then in terms of social media, my Instagram is Erika_LaCasse, and then you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you want to, talk to me more about consulting or about entrepreneurship, I'm always, happy to connect with people. So feel free.
All right. And then one last thing is, what can we do to support you or CassCaps?
So as I mentioned earlier, right now we're really focused on fulfilling the Kickstarter orders because they were our first supporters and our first customers, and we made a promise to them. So they're our priority. But like I said, we're also starting a pre-order store that's going to be live shortly. So if you would like to purchase some CassCaps or just support the company, you're more than welcome to pre-order and kind of be part of the fun that way. You can also support us by liking us on Facebook at CassCaps Kitchen or by following our Instagram, which is CassCaps. I try to post a lot of, great recipes and recipe videos and pictures. So if you're a big foodie, definitely follow the account.
Sounds great. And thank you so much. I definitely learned a lot, and it's a lot of amazing stories that even if I wasn't interested, it was just very entertaining to listen to. But I'm definitely going to be pre-ordering CassCaps. I actually, when you mentioned about this, I need this in my life. I just keep on having all these measuring spoons just out here and about, and then I'm just like, oh, and then I don't know, it's just a mess. Like every time I just do it, it's just not coming out, or it's just not giving me the right measurements. I needed this. Especially since I actually don't really cook that much, but I have been going into more cooking because of the quarantine, and now I'm realizing I need it more than ever.
That is a trend we've been seeing. A lot of more people are cooking, and actually the Google searches for bread has been on the rise, which is also ironic because CassCaps all started with homemade bread. My dad trying to impress my mom making bread, so it's a full circle.
All right, so thank you so much, and that actually concludes our interview, and all of the links down below will be bringing you into Erika's social media accounts or CassCaps. Very excited to order some CassCaps, and then maybe I'll be using it in a video here and there. And also, since you have now moved into New York, we can finally probably go grab some coffee.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. It was really great to be able to share my story and hopefully inspire some people and motivate some people. So
definitely. Thank you so much.